Hey, sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown live show focused on the NBA draft. Today, on my left, I'm joined by Adam Stanco, who is the host of the, oh my goodness gracious, the Rejecting the Screen podcast, and a long history of covering the NBA draft, which is his way of being a nice way of saying he's a draft expert and knows all of these players and their intricate details. Adam, thanks for joining me tonight.
Coach Nick, how much fun is this? How much fun is this?
We've got a lot of things to talk about, and it's insane already. I mean, we could get off the draft if you wanted to and talk about, what happened to Klay Thompson today, but let's keep us focused. Let me make sure I got my eye on the comment section too, because we want to make sure we give a big shout out to everybody that's out there right now. Lots of people there. If you have your questions, make sure you throw them out there. Obviously, one of the best ways to get our attention is a super chat, and they'll get all the way to the top, and I can answer that way in depth and detail. But either way, amazing. Great. Thank you guys for all being here. Let's start with the top of the draft. We've already gotten some picks. Number one was Minnesota. And Adam, take it away. Break it down for us and who they decided and who Anthony Edwards is.
Well, Anthony Edwards, guard from Georgia. He's incredibly strong, explosive, can really score. We know that about Anthony Edwards. The question mark for Anthony Edwards is, how much does he love the game? And we just heard comments this week that the guy possibly likes football more than basketball, and things can be misconstrued, and there could be a smokescreen here that maybe he didn't want to end up with Minnesota. But I do think that there's no question when you watch him play that he does play with passion. So that's not a concern of mine. It's always about how much is he going to put the work in at the next level? And, in today's NBA, having a wing who can score, who can be physical, who can score at all three levels, you have to love that about him. I mean, the guy's pretty impressive. Like I said, physical specimen. His assist-to-turnover ratio was 1-to-1, essentially. And here's the other thing, Nick. Even though we've seen him shoot well in bursts and we saw him explode like in Maui, he shot 40% from the field this year, under 30% from three. And so if you just look at shooting numbers, and listen, workouts are going to tell a different story, and we saw that in some individual workouts. But just if you look at the numbers for the season, that's going to make you hesitate just a little bit if you're worried about a wing who can't shoot. That's going to be scary. For sure.
So I dug into the footage to watch him because obviously he took over almost 8 threes a game and shot under 30%, which is not good. The college line is shorter than the NBA line, so it doesn't always translate. He did shoot 77% from the free throw line, which is okay. And let's get into the weeds for a minute because, the thing that jumped out at me when I'm watching him shoot is that his rhythm is off, and you're going to hear that a lot. My fear of college coaches and their training methods, the biggest fear I have is that they don't know how to teach shooting. A lot of them end up saying, well, we'll hope that he does well. We'll try to give him the confidence to shoot as well as he can without ever really trying to help his mechanics when, in fact, you can really help these guys' mechanics, and it's not too late. I think there's an old school mindset where, the guy is 18, you're never going to be able to change it anymore. Nonsense. His rhythm is off. So when we're looking at the arm swing up into the shot in conjunction with when the triple extension of the legs are happening with the ankles, knees, and hips, it happens the arms are coming up way too early, so the energy doesn't flow properly. And you're talking about shooting from distance, it's a big issue, and you can't calibrate power that way. He also likes to hang in the air on those threes. I know he's a great athlete. He generates a lot of power from his legs, but he needs to figure out how to better control that energy flow and rhythm without having to hang in the air. He'll never be a consistent three-point shooter, as far as I can tell, by hanging in the air on your three-point shot. I don't think we've ever had a guy in the NBA who's done it that way. They've all shot at the top of the jump. So that's the real downside here at a position where you'd probably want to value shooting, wouldn't you say?
You have to value shooting. And to your point, there are many guys who came into the league and there were question marks about their overall shooting ability, and then they figured it out. I mean, it's through repetition, through training. And I know every spring I go and spend time with Don McClain, who's the preeminent pre-draft workout guy. People remember him as Pac-12's all-time leading scorer and former NBA most improved player. But Don works with players, and what he'll often say is over the time that he has them, basically from March till the draft, he's not going to change their form. So he's going to work on what they already do and just get them to work on reps and game speed so that when they go to team workouts, they'll show out pretty well. And so he'll improve their consistency. But if there's a mechanics issue, if there's a fundamentals problem, to your point, he then needs a whole offseason. And so that's what they'll do. So you see that oftentimes. That's why you see often a change between year one, year two, that huge jump that you see. But I think about a guy like DeMar DeRozan, the people were like, wow, atrocious shooter at USC. He goes to the league. He realizes he's not a three-point shooter, but certainly has proven to be one of the best mid-range guys in the game. So it's certainly an issue that can be corrected and that the workout guys will often improve. And that's one of the things that makes this year so strange. Workout guys haven't had a chance to work with individuals on their game. So that's an issue right there.
I agree. Yeah, and Don McLean would never have the ability, honestly, to try and adjust mechanics at that crucial moment a month before the draft or whatever it is. He wouldn't, you can't afford to mess around with that, which is why the college coaches, they'll claim they don't have a lot of time, but in reality, I think there is time, and it's crucial in that development of the age of when you can get there and help them. So it's frustrating to see a guy like Anthony Edwards probably not have any conception of rhythm and what could be used to improve that. So you have to hope that he'll get with a good NBA trainer, and they'll work on it with him, get in the gym, and he'll actually iron those things out. It might take him a little while. And, listen, he's a tremendous athlete, and he will be able to have an effect on the game. Just out of curiosity, do you know what the Minnesota Timberwolves rank in three-point percentage for last year in the league?
I don't. Do you have it in front of you?
I do. 28th. So here's a team that really was almost last in shooting threes, and they picked this guy. It's, now that said, there are a couple other guys who are in the same build as Anthony Edwards that did shoot a lot better. So you got to wonder how that's going to work. And, independent of him liking the game or not, there are other players in the league, believe it or not, who don't like basketball either. And some of them have made the All-Star games and have done well, but ultimately would probably hold you back to getting to deep in the playoffs or a championship. So, well, let's move on to our next pick. What do you say? This one isn't necessarily surprising because the Warriors obviously needed some more size, and they're kind of thin on the shooting too, right? After Steph and Clay, and we have to say the breaking news that we're seeing. I don't have any extra inside information just yet. I didn't even want to find out, but it sounds like it's pretty serious. I don't think we're going to be right, Adam. We're not going to be saying anything out of the ordinary by saying it sounds like it's pretty serious, right?
No, it seems like a serious leg injury, and people expect that Klay Thompson could be out for quite a while. And without speculating, that's just what seems to be out there. The one thing I will say about the Warriors right now, you look at what the roster was coming in, and people forget because everybody was basically out or with an injury or decided to maybe take some time this season because everyone sort of agreed that it was a wash. Why not get a high draft pick? They end up with number 2. But you think about Steph, okay, even if Klay is going to be out for a period of time, Draymond Green, and then look who comes in last year. Andrew Wiggins plays a role, and then also the rookies. Jordan Poole has shooting, adds to the team in that capacity, and then Eric Pascal obviously has a terrific year. Jordan Poole and Eric Pascal, former Don McLean disciples, by the way, worked out with him and saw that both of them work out last summer. So James Wiseman's the pick there at number 2. And you're talking about a guy that's over 7 feet tall, only got a chance to play 3 games this year, Coach. And then basically between NCAA rules violations, there was a whole incident that took place because Penny Hardaway was his coach in high school, and it was about impermissible benefits. So it first started out as a controversy of, well, Penny gave him money, so now the NCAA was investigating. There was going to be a suspension. Memphis was holding him out. Then after a while, Memphis said, we're going to bring him back to the team. We don't care what the NCAA is saying. We'll take our chances. Then that happens, and basically everything fell apart. Next thing you know, he says, hey, I'm gone. I'm just going to go to the league. So he only played 3 games last year, tiny sample size, but you love the way the kid finishes. You love the fact that he can score. He can score from the mid post. He can face you up. It's not just a back to the basket, athletic big that you're talking about. So you're talking about a guy with tremendous size who can also hit from the mid range. And then he rebounds and blocks shots. I mean, small sample size, like I said, but he shot nearly 80% from the field last year. Again, you're talking about 3 games being played. But the interesting question for you, Coach, is the idea that this kid hasn't played a game since November 12th of last year. So we're talking about now it's been a year. How is that going to impact you when you go from one level to the next, when it's already difficult enough, but now you haven't played a game in a year?
Right. And by the way, COVID has also made a problem where no one's playing like, full-on scrimmages. At least I hope they're not, but I keep seeing across the country, like high schools and whatever, even in colleges, they are doing it. So I would imagine he's found runs where he could kind of at least keep in shape and play, but that doesn't anywhere come close to like what an NBA game is like. So I have a feeling that he will be rusty, might not even be the right word because he's already so inexperienced as it is. And that'll be really interesting to see how that's going to play out. Now, without Klay Thompson, all of a sudden they really don't have a lot of shooting at all. It's going to be a really fascinating thing because Pascal, speaking of a guy who hangs in the air before he shoots, that's a guy who, doesn't. I think he probably actually shot well. I could check in a second from 3, but I don't know if Pascal can keep that up, through a whole season doing that. Now, meanwhile, Anthony Edwards, by the way, does have a nice shot. From what I could see in the very limited, possessions we did, lefty shot. It's 2 motion.
James Wiseman. You mean James Wiseman?
I mean, what did I say? Anthony, James Wiseman. Excuse me. They're running on top of each other in my notes. So, but his release does look good, and we've seen him shoot from like 15, 16, and that looks good. So then you start to wonder, okay, is this the kind of thing where he can pick and maybe pop to the 3-point line eventually? Like maybe, but he definitely looks like the classic big man, good body or great body, good hands, runs, rim to rim really well. So he looks like that kind of traditional big man, which you'd think would kind of be extinct at this point. 5 years from now, Wiseman will be like Durant, I would imagine, right? They're going to let him play more like a guard. All those big guys will play like guards. So they should. It's boring to run, block to block and getting beat on every single time and just setting screens all the time. No one wants to do that. So, so he is sort of a relic, and we talked about this before we went live. Teams continue to value these kind of players, I think, a lot more than they should. Now, I know the Warriors had a good need for the big man like that, so that kind of makes sense to me. But in reality, you can find a lot of guys who are high energy, long, can grab rebounds, block shots, don't really shoot from the outside. I don't know. I feel like those guys you can find a lot lower in the draft. It's the guys that can shoot that you can't find, and yet we continue to see these big guys keep going at the very, very top of the draft.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, now we're sort of seeing teams with this. Maybe a point guard, but then the rest of their 2 through 4 men are oftentimes just wings, interchangeable. That they're running a lot of switches, all pick and roll, everything's switch now, switch in the league. And so then you have your one rim protector, right? You're getting somebody that's got some size. And in today's NBA, whether that's you're looking at someone like a Clint Capella or even Rockets play small ball this year and still need Robert Covington because at the end of the day, if someone's penetrating, you still need someone in the paint that's going to be able to block a shot and make things a little bit difficult for other teams to get easy buckets. So it's funny, you're talking about an athletic big, a guy who can run the floor. So you have that. The real question always becomes in switches, how they're going to handle, playing against guys out on the perimeter. And I think that Wiseman, just because of his length, his athleticism, he's going to be able to do that. And I think that's going to be a critical point. And the fact of the matter is he can also score for you and he can shoot. And so even in today's league, you want to go extra small, he's going to be able to post up and cause some problems that way as well. So I think you still do need a classic 5-man. Whether the Warriors end up with him at the end of the night, there's been a lot of talk about a potential trade there. And so it could be possible that James Wiseman may not be a Warrior by the start of the season. But as of right now, that's where he is.
Interesting. Okay, especially because of the Klay news. So Varun Rizput, thank you so much, big friend of the breakdown, for your super chat. And his question was, we wanted to talk about Golden State drafting Wiseman, which we just started when you sent the chat over. And he wants to know if it makes him a contender. Well, obviously, without Klay, they're nothing. They cannot compete. I mean, I know Steph can detonate, but they needed Klay as well. They needed the whole team together to do that. So I don't see this happening. Now, I don't know if Wiseman put him over the top anyway. And like you said, he might not even be on the team when we get to the season, which is starting tomorrow, basically, right? So I don't know. We'll have to see. I think Wiseman's still a project. It was hard to tell how good his post game was because the games he played, he was dwarfing the people, right? All he had to do was just throw it up there and he'd just go after it and then lay it in practically. So I wouldn't be surprised if we realize that he doesn't have a very mature post game. But who knows? Maybe since in the year he hasn't been playing, he's been going to work and really refining these things. I hope, but we shall see. But I think it's probably time to go on to the next pick. What do you say?
Let's go for it.
All right. Well, what is the next pick? The next pick is LaMelo Ball that went to Charlotte. Now, I did a video on LaMelo Ball, so I'm pretty familiar with what his game looked like in the NBL. By the way, we had an interesting discussion about the NBL and where it ranks in the world as far as how good that league is. Do you want to weigh in on that, or do you want to have some?
I know it's getting better and better. I recently talked to Matt Walsh, who's owner of the New Zealand Breakers, and Matt owns that team. Sean Marion, also an owner for the Breakers, interestingly enough. But Matt's talked about just the development of the league on the whole and just the talent infusion they've had. And not only is LaMelo, who's lottery pick in this draft, but RJ Hampton played for the Breakers himself, and he's a talented kid too. They bring him out of high school and have him go overseas. And so I'd say the NBL is certainly a very good league. Is the EuroLeague? No. Is it comparable to the G League? I don't know. I mean, I'd probably say it's down a step, but the truth of the matter is players can develop there and there's talent. So we shouldn't dismiss anything that happens in the NBL. It's not like we're talking about a lower division European league that you can just throw away and say that there's no barometer there. And the thing I'll say about LaMelo Ball, Coach, is that everyone I talk to has just glowing things to say. So again, I'll go back to Don. I know Don McClain worked out LaMelo last spring. KZ Okpala was there, the second round pick from the Heat, Stanford player. LaMelo's just in high school and was out playing KZ in stretches at the workouts. And then LaMelo gets bigger, stronger, taller, and improves as he spends the next year again playing overseas and all. Matt Walsh had wonderful things to say about him. I talked to Earl Watson, former coach of the Suns. He raved about LaMelo, and he said it's his work ethic that sets him apart, that he'll play pickup, and then he'll be one of those guys goes back to the gym and does individual work with his trainer. So I think so many people have talked glowingly about LaMelo Ball and his work ethic and the kind of kid he is. And I know that goes against what we've thought about LaMelo for years, and we forget that he was 13, 14 when he jumped on the national scene. So I'm rooting for him, and I think he could end up being an outstanding talent.
Well, that's why we bring you on the show, because you bring in that kind of insight and have wide-ranging influences and information. Really great stuff on his work ethic, which was, I didn't doubt it because he's very skilled and you have to work a lot to get that skill. So the thing that's interesting is, in light of the Klay Thompson injury, which we've heard is probably bad, and it's some sort of lower leg injury. You have to wonder if it's Achilles or did he break his ankle or do something like what Gordon Hayward had done. So it's worrisome in a way that maybe they would have grabbed LaMelo instead. They're like, hey, let's ride this and see what happens. But they didn't do it. But yeah, listen, funky shot like his brother, who, by the way, even with the funky shot, would still display really big stretches of good shooting and maybe not consistent. But then again, who is consistent these days? But we've also seen Lonzo kind of iron it out a little bit and look a lot better. And ultimately, he shot pretty well last year, believe it or not. So I have faith that LaMelo can also find that same trajectory on his jump shot. His vision, though, is out of this world. He really is a willing passer, which makes him so hard to guard. The thing you got to worry about are those guys who've been playing against pros since they were like 15, 16. And this kid's been playing like in the Drew League, which, again, Drew League is not that intense in terms of compared to like the NBA or anything. But these are guys who are played in Europe. They play in the NBA sometimes too. And he gets in those runs and he does well. And if you're 16 and you're playing against guys, Andre Drummond is out there, Harden has shown up, and a lot of Euro guys, that's pretty impressive. So you got to keep your eye on all these guys, by the way, which is the age of so many of these guys are all 19, 18, 19. They're all in these runs probably in the summers against these men. Those are the guys who won't be intimidated by the NBA players when they get there, in theory. And that's certainly what will happen with LaMelo. He won't be intimidated at all. He will play his game. The audacity of some of his passes might end up looking really bad and they might get thrown in the stands and whatnot, but he will eventually iron those out and those passes will hit the guys where they need to be. And he ultimately might be better than his brother.
Yeah, well, yeah. And there's some differences there. One is talking to guys, his work ethic is light years ahead of his brothers. So what Lonzo did was impressive and certainly had a wonderful year at UCLA. People forget, though, there was almost no mid-range game to him. And it was either take it all the way to the rim or he would shoot threes. And he shot a good clip in college, but not the same thing when you reach the NBA. And so we also know Lonzo Ball wasn't a good free throw shooter. So there were issues there. Didn't want to go to the line for that reason, actually in his short stint in the league now. So all those things that you said, and the other big takeaway from what you pointed out was that, look, you talk about those top 3 picks, all 19 years old. And the first number that NBA folks look at, and whether you're talking about scouts or front office people, it's always age. They always want to look at what is this kid going to be in 3 years, and that's where there's a basis of comparison. So there's someone that I love, Obi Toppin, that we'll be talking about shortly, but Obi Toppin is 22 years old. And so when you look at a comparison, and whether that's any of those 3 that we mentioned, Edwards, Ball, Wiseman, compared to an Obi Toppin, it's not just how do they match up now, but what will they look like in 3 years once they've been through the rigors of the NBA and playing against those guys, not just in the Drew League, but practicing against them every day, working out, having nutritionists, all those things, with how their body's going to change. And that's sort of where the basis of comparison comes. And that's why those guys end up going 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely. Great point. Let's move on to the next pick, shall we? Because they're getting ahead of us here. This is great. I'm happy about the pace we have going. So the Bulls, they were talking about trading this pick and maybe, trading with Golden State, maybe giving up Wendell Carter. It turned out that was BS, apparently. So they kept the pick. They used it on Patrick Williams of Florida State. Now, he was on the lists of everyone. Again, the list of potential first-round draft choices that people were passing around was like 45 players long, right? Which is crazy long for what we would normally consider, the first round of the NBA draft. He made it in there, and I was looking at him, and I remember texting you, I believe, right, where I was like, are you serious? This can't possibly be right. This guy didn't start a game at Florida State, which, Florida State, let me see, how well did they do this year? I think they had a decent year, right? They were, 26-5 on a good team, but he averaged 9 points a game, didn't shoot well from 3, didn't shoot too many. The biggest takeaway, I think I wrote like in all caps, not ready. He's simply not ready to play in the NBA. He has a good body, and he has some physical tools, but I'm just shocked that he would get picked in the top 5, in the top 20.
It's remarkable. And look, it speaks to what this draft is this season. And what this draft is just a bunch of people guessing about what other teams are doing, first of all. So all these mocks that we saw, they're all going to be a mess.
Yeah.
And you see it now, and this is the first real shocker. We knew what the top 3 was going to be, but all those are a mess because there's not intel on these teams, and there's not a lot of intel on these players. And so you take a guy like Patrick Williams, you're talking about a top 30 prospect out of high school, and that's where teams felt like they saw him and they saw a different player. They saw a kid who could shoot. They see a raw, athletic kid, but they think that he can shoot. And if you feel like he can shoot, well, then there's a lot to like about his future potentially. But to your point, 0 starts in his 29 games this year. He had 18 points in the 3rd game of the season for Florida State. That was against Western Carolina. He never scores that much again for the rest of the season. So we're talking about a kid that didn't hit the 20-point mark all year long. So he hasn't learned to dominate the college game, and oftentimes that's a bad sign for the league. Now, are there guys at the college level that don't really get to put up the amount of shots you would love to see? Sure, Joel Embiid's a great example of that. But for a guy that doesn't start for his college team, and Leonard Hamilton plays a lot of guys, he still played 22 minutes a night. He was somewhat productive in that time. Like you said, scores 9 points a game. But certainly question marks. And for me, there are other players that have established themselves, shown great productivity already at this point in their young careers, and we haven't really seen it from Patrick Williams. I'm stunned that they went there, especially when you have someone like Obi Toppin on the board, especially because if you're the Bulls, you have the pick of the litter outside that top 3, and that's who you decide to go with. It's just I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Yeah, he's a good athlete. He can really jump. And his body doesn't look like a freshman. He's really, to the point where is he really 19? He looks older than that to me. But decision-making was just, way off. And didn't read well. And the game's only going to be faster for him and better athletes and longer. I worry that he won't get much of a shot. So if you're a Bulls fan, I wouldn't expect to see him play too much. 2-motion shot, the rhythm is way off on his jump shot. It was I even wrote yikes because there's just so much to have to clean up energy transfer wise. And is he going to have enough time? Is he going to have enough training? The right guy to help him do that? I don't know. Some guys know how to do that. Some of the NBA trainers, some guys don't. And I hope he's just not spinning his wheels for a year trying to get that going. But either way, I suspect he'll have a lot of time on the bench to watch the game, play, the 2-on-2 after practice with the other guys, not the guys who don't get a lot of playing time, and develop. But yeah, this is the project. I don't think he's not helping the Bulls this year. Should we move on? Let's move on to the next pick then. Number 5, we got Isaac Okoro from Auburn that was picked by the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers have been a little bit in obscurity recently, although we had this interesting gun news from, oh my goodness, who was the guy who got arrested with having gun possession? Their guard. Anyway, live TV. But Isaac Okoro out of Auburn. Give us your thoughts on how he played this past year.
So he's explosive, and I think you're talking about one of the best athletes in the draft and probably the best defensive player in this draft. He's one of those guys that can be a lockdown defender and really man up. And as you know, there are a lot of guys in the league. You have to learn to play team defense, but it's very hard to be a one-on-one defender, to be that kind of athlete and have that kind of mindset in the NBA. Isaac Okoro has it. He's one of those guys who wants the other team's best player. He did that at the high school level. He did it at Auburn, and he's an explosive athlete. So then you say, okay, well, what about the offensive game? And that's where there are some question marks. I mean, he is, once again, another 19-year-old, theme of the draft, at least for the first 5 picks. He turned 19. He'll be 20 in January. Average just under 13 points a game. He's 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. And shot 51% from the floor this year, but 28.6% from 3. So you're talking about a guy who, look, he's not going to be a 3-and-D guy for you. He's just going to be a defensive specialist. But I think if you think about him in Cleveland, it's one of those culture changers. And the fact is, he could be so good defensively that he can really change their entire mindset on that side of the floor. And again, he's going to run. His energy is going to be terrific. And his offensive game is only going to improve. He's a terrific athlete. So if his shooting can improve, he's one of those guys you would have loved to have seen in workouts, in team workouts, individual workouts. I would have loved to have seen him this spring and seen how much development on his offensive game he had. But you can't teach that motor. You can't teach that athleticism. And so for those reasons, I understand why Cleveland would go in that direction.
Sure. I mean, I could a quick look at the at Cleveland. I have a feeling we're going to find them at the very bottom of the 3-point shooting barrel as well. They're 20th in the league in 3-point shooting. So again, they're getting a guy who isn't going to shoot well from the 3-point line in the NBA. My notes on him, rhythm issues. Again, you're going to hear me say rhythm issues all night long with all these guys. There's a lot of guys in this range who are all like 6'6", 6'7", good athletes, similar skill levels. That's probably why it was really hard to sort of figure out who was going to go where. And the list contains a bunch. I think I'm correct in saying that they're all. There's probably 10 or 15 of these guys that are all 6'6", 6'7". And so the question then is like, what position is he? Doesn't get a lot of assists at Auburn, but I found that he was a willing passer. In the clips that I went through, he was willing to find the open man and hit him. And so that was good to see that he's not just a guy who's going to put his head down and try and score every single time and take bad shots. He likes to attack by splitting his feet, which is great to see that he's not just doing triple threat BS and he's attacking on the catch and going right away. The issues he has with his jump shot is he hangs in the air. Not all the time. So that's, again, even worse because it's really inconsistent. Some of those threes he took, he hung in the air and then shot it. Other times he doesn't. So it's there. The ones that he doesn't shoot that hang in the air are the ones he should be shooting that way all the time. So that's interesting to see that maybe they can pinpoint that and say, hey, that's the way you got to shoot it. You already know how to do it that way. Let's just avoid the ones where you're hanging in the air too long. And that would really help him shoot better. And the last thing I have is, he's very much of a line driver, straight line. Not very shifty, and I suspect that he's going to need a little bit of that stop and start, change of speed, change of direction stuff, against NBA players who are going to, be able to scout him and know where he wants to do.
No question. And the other big thing I'll say about him is when he attacks the rim, he's fearless. He's one of those guys that will dunk on you. And again, it's an interesting pick when you're talking about the best defensive player in the draft. That's a guy that you have to be thinking about taking high because those guys are just so few and far between. And yes, we can work on the offensive side of your game, but defensively to have that kind of intensity and that kind of physical skill. And yes, he's 6'6", and you point out all the wings that are around that size. He's also 225 pounds. So you're talking about a guy that in a couple of years is going to be 240, 6. And you see what like PJ Tucker has done, with his size and strength. And now take a guy that's way more explosive and think about what he could do on the defensive end.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can see. Here's the thing: a guy like Isaac Okoro, even if is he 6'6"? Is that what he's listed at right now? I think. Yeah. So he could play small ball 4. I think the 6'6" guys, if they're somewhat big enough, as we go further into the NBA, 3-4 years from now, I'm telling you, that's the kind of guy that would play small ball 4 for you and be successful at that, and he could be that guy for sure. But what makes that possible is if he can spread the floor. So he's going to have to get there, sooner than later if he wants to be able to find that. So we'll have to see. But I definitely have some strong opinions about our next pick. If you like to go for there, are you ready, Adam?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. And again, welcome everybody into the streaming chat. Incredible amount of people here. Thank you all for joining us. Don't forget, if you want to get a question in here at the top of the pick, the super chat is the way to go. I will try and kind of keep my eye on the chat here to see if I can answer any other things. But Adam Stanco is a god is in the comments right now, and that is probably the biggest truth we've had so far in our show. So let's get going.
Is the last name on that comment or Stanco? Because I'm sure my mom or my
member of your family. We'll see, but nonetheless, he was not paid. It looks like it was unsolicited, and it's true. But let's get to Onyeka Okongwu, who was out of USC, and I know him too because I saw him play as a freshman for Chino Hills alongside of LaMelo Ball and playing alongside Lonzo Ball as a senior. And I'm depressed. This is depressing to me, what happened to his game in the interim since I had seen him as a freshman. Adam, would you understand why I'm depressed?
Well, you're about to tell me. I'm assuming that it's going to be about the shooting. Is my assumption.
Here's a guy who was primed on a team. If you hadn't ever seen the Chino Hills play when the Ball brothers were there, it was a radical version of basketball where they would throw like 55-foot post-entry passes, right? And they would spread the floor and they would just shoot threes all over the place. It was modern, but in a very distinctive, unique way, even for high school. And here was a guy who, I would have thought he would have developed into a ball handler and like run the point guard, position to some degree and shoot threes and post up and do a lot of everything. Well, he gets to USC and he's playing like Buck Williams in 1990, like, basically power forward guy with center, an undersized center because he's about 6'9". And so I was just frustrated seeing like there was so much potential there, from 4 years ago. And, he's fine. He's a good athlete. He's got good hands. I know he's got a high basketball IQ, but I just wasn't seeing enough of what I was hoping to see from him in that setting that would indicate he'd be anything but like just a normal NBA player who I don't think will stand out unless he, is allowed to play. He should be like a Draymond Green small ball 4 guy. Small ball 5.
Yeah, the big comparison that keeps popping up with him is Bam Adebayo, and people say that's the guy that if you're drafting Onyeka Okongwu, that's who you think he's going to turn into. And so you got the explosiveness, you've got the length. Again, scored over 16 points a game. He's blocking nearly 3 shots a game. Shoots it well from the field. And look, one of the great indicators of whether somebody can turn into a good outside shooter in the NBA, and you've sort of alluded to this, is their free throw shooting. He shoots 72% from the line as a freshman big. Not wonderful, but also something that you certainly feel like you can work with. And when you talk about his form and all, I think you're going to be in good shape. And I think the other thing is, can he be a small ball 5-man? Can he be your 5-man if you're talking about a bunch of wings and then a point guard that you're playing alongside him, and you certainly feel like he can be a rim protector, definitely explosive in terms of the dunking ability, his rim running. There's a lot to like about Okongwu. And when you talk about some of the bigs that were in the Pac-12 this year, it's not just Okongwu. There was Isaiah Stewart. There was Zeke Naji of Arizona. Tyler Bey of Colorado could be considered a 4-man. There were a bunch of athletic, big, stronger guys and was sort of looking to see who would differentiate themselves. And Okongwu, as time went on, seemed to be the cream of the crop in terms of an NBA prospect. And so just because of seeing how talented those other guys are and how NBA scouts liked him the most gives me reason to believe there's some hope there that he could be a guy that they're going to play, I think, pretty early on. And you start to think about the explosiveness now on this Hawks roster. I mean, you're talking about Trae Young. You talk about Kevin Huerter and John Collins. I mean, I really like that core. And now it's, okay, let's add more athletic ability, more explosiveness to the front line. And it follows, again, that sort of Warriors model of like, let's have one guy that's a defensive player that's explosive, and then surround the rest of the team with shooters and guys with high basketball IQs. He could be the right fit as a small ball 5 on that team.
Sure. And I think that my frustration is more just the absence of being able to see what I was hoping to see out of him versus that he can't do it. I was, him setting a ball screen and short rolling and then one dribble and making a decision to either shoot or pass. I didn't really see that at all. And I think that's what he would probably excel with. Not the pass as much. All I saw from him was like maybe a pick and a pop, and he just go to the basket and he would overwhelm some of the talent we saw in the Pac-12, which won't happen as much in the NBA. So that's an interesting question. He's going to have to be able to make that next skip pass to the corner for the open shooter at some point and develop that. I just don't know if he's got that or not. But either way, I mean, it's a good pick at that spot. The question now is how do they manage all these, these sort of like DeAndre Hunter and John Collins are all sort of in that same that size range. Heck, maybe they could play them all together. And with Trae Young small in the backcourt, they have some options here.
Yeah, they have options for sure. And I think to your point, it still, again, speaks to this draft and how difficult it is to evaluate prospects and stuff. And the teams that I spoke to heading into tonight and just talking to guys around the league, no one had a clue about anything. They said, I don't really know who the number 1 pick is going to be. I have a sense. Everyone sort of felt like they knew the top 3. And then beyond that, they really didn't know. And again, it's because there's not a lot of intel on players. And also, there's not a lot of room to figure out what teams were doing. Because usually what you can figure out in individual workouts and team workouts, you go to the gym, you start to hear stuff. And it's the same thing. You have so many friends around the league, Coach, and I know it's the same thing for you. You talk to guys and you'll hear and they really like someone. And you might tell a friend, and now next thing you know, it sort of leaks out, even though they trust in you. I know you don't reveal your secrets. But the thing is that oftentimes that information leaks out. And what's made this draft already so interesting and we'll continue to see is that teams kept things close to the vest. And information wasn't leaking out because it wasn't the normal, who were the Celtics, talking about? Who was Danny Ainge asking about? Or you talk to, who was asking about that player? And you just don't have that this year. So that's why everyone was sort of hiding stuff. And this normal smoke screens weren't even necessary because people are so clueless about the information that other teams have.
For sure. Well, let's move on to our next pick because we are already up to number 7 with the Pistons, who took Killian Hayes, who is one of my favorite players in this draft, playing in France. A guy who's a lefty, and I mentioned shiftiness for I think it was Anthony Edwards and and not having it. But talking about shifty, here's a lefty guy that's got a lot of change of pace to his game, really nice floater, and can shoot the ball from distance without much conscience to say. He'll take these step back threes and shoots them well. And he is, again, another one of these 19-year-olds. So I really like him. What do you have listed for his height?
I have Killian Hayes 6'5".
Okay.
6'5" lefty.
Yeah, B-ball reference tends to be shorter than what they are. Yeah, because he looks taller than 6'4", listed here at 6'5". So he's got size. He's a guy who's probably in the mold of, like, I guess you'd say D'Angelo Russell, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good comp. He sort of has that same feel to him. I don't know that he's not the same exceptional passer that D'Angelo Russell was coming out of Ohio State, but he's certainly crafty as a lefty, and that's something that's really interesting about him. His dad played at Penn State. So he has the pedigree. We think about him as an international player. He comes from France, but really he's a guy who's got roots in the States, and he's got the hardened step back already. That's a big part of his game. He's a bigger player. There's a lot to really like about him in terms of his confidence and playing sort of at his own pace. And you really like that size that you were talking about. I like the defensive stance he gets into. The issue almost with me sometimes with him bringing the ball up the floor, he wasn't turning it over, but he'd have to pick the ball up a lot more than I would like to see, especially from a player coming over internationally. Now, again, the handle's going to be worked on, and he's still a young player. So there's a lot to like about his potential offensively, and he could certainly shoot the basketball. And so I really like Killian Hayes. And, at 6'5", you take that size, you take the lefty, he's a little bit unorthodox, and then you talk about him being in that pick and roll game and being able to step back and shoot it. Again, a lot to like about him, but there are some question marks about just how strong of a ball handler he ultimately is going to be in the league. And that's, of course, critical for any perimeter player as a primary ball handler.
And I'm not worried about that. I've seen enough to think that he'll be able to iron out whatever his issues might be pretty quickly because, again, he's got that vision that coaches like us are always trying to figure out. Can you teach that? Can you teach the audacity to throw passes that, like, D'Angelo Russell will throw, or you'll see LaMelo Ball throw? And he does that really, really well, and it looks to pass that way. Averaged, over 6 assists a game in Europe. I'm going to make sure that's right, but over 6 assists a game. So I'm really impressed with the skill level here. And even like the floaters. Floaters are not easy, right? Those are the most difficult shots you can master. And he seems like he's got a good mastery over those shots as it is now. So he's got a leg up on how he's going to be able to fit into the NBA. Now, Detroit obviously has, they floundered around last year and didn't do well. They now have who took over Detroit? It's a good question. Let me see if it says it here. It hasn't said it yet. Am I crazy? You don't remember who they got rid of Dwayne Casey?
Yeah, Troy Weaver. Troy Weaver's now in charge.
Okay, so they're going to be rebuilding. They're going to have a lot of extra time for all these young guys to play and develop. I suspect Andre Drummond's probably going to get moved if they can move him, right? And they're going to start over. So, Derrick Rose is there. So that's the only question is, if they end up playing, that would be depressing to me if some of these guys will end up, these veterans who are, already, they're not going to win a lot of games anyway. They should just give him free reign and let him develop on his own and learn how to handle all that, the pressure. I would like to see that because I think he has a really high ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. And the Pistons are one of these teams that actually they've got a lot of ability under the cap right now. And so you already talk about a backcourt that could be really interesting. Two lefties who can both beat you creatively, offensively, and Luke Kennard and Killian Hayes. And I think that's going to make for a really interesting backcourt. You may see them switch in terms of who ends up bringing the ball up on occasion. Both those guys with the ability to handle it. And, I'm basically, in terms of the way that their roster's currently constructed, you've got Blake Griffin, who's got he's on the books next year with a huge player option. But other than that, I mean, they have total cap flexibility after this season. So I really like the position the Pistons are in terms of what they could potentially do. Now, of course, it doesn't mean anything if you don't have the talent there. But the fact that they're going after Killian Hayes, who could be a difference maker in this draft, you have to like and think that's one of the pieces they're really going to feel strongly about building upon. They didn't go with the safe pick here. They went with the guy that could have a really high ceiling, and we could be saying, wow, everybody blew it on Killian Hayes. And the Pistons got it right.
Absolutely. Write that down because I think that's going to happen. And Barun Resput, again, another super chat. Thank you. He agrees. He thinks like Detroit made the right decision this year. And they need it. Detroit needs something good, to look at and celebrate and get a rally around their team. It's been a while. So I really like that pick. And then we have another one. The Trib One, another friend of the breakdown. Thank you so much. Do you think the teams are getting it right? Few head scratchers in this draft because of lack of basketball in March to sway them. I like this class. Now, the Trib One, it makes an awesome point because we've seen drafts littered with guys that would get hot in the NCAA tournament and they get everybody really excited about them and they end up being a real dud. So what do you think? Do you think that the absence of the tournament actually helped them make better picks?
Yeah, I do. I think it can certainly sway people's opinions way more than should be. And one of the things that happens is you have to consider human nature takes over. So as it gets later and later in the process, more people get involved as the field sort of gets narrowed down. And the one good thing about the NCAA tournament is everybody's watching. They have time for it. They find a way to watch games. They're all over, highlight shows. People are talking about it. You're with your family. So word gets out and reputations start to grow. But the other thing that happens is there's individual matchups that scouts love to be able to capture that they can't, if you think about it, during conference play, which has taken place the last few months of the season. So a lot of times it's like you start with this giant pool of players, then you start to whittle it away. You start to get more information. But once it's in conference play, teams know a lot about each other. The scouting's at a really high level. Now you get into the NCAA tournament. The interesting thing that happens is you get one kid from, let's say, Penn State, who's now going up against someone from USC. And so this matchup that maybe wouldn't have happened during the regular season, now it happens. There's not a lot of scouting, and you could see these two go head to head. And so a lot is drawn from just this one-off game. If a guy has a great game, he can fly up, and of course the reverse is true. The other thing about this, obviously, is, again, without the normal ways which teams can evaluate prospects, which happen once the season ends, and those are individual team workouts when they bring the guys in, also the combine where you do official measurements. Those things just didn't get a chance to happen this year. There were some team workouts. There were some measurables that came through, but we didn't really have this universal way. So it was Zoom calls and interviews. You didn't get to see a kid in the gym and see his work ethic and all that. So I think the lack of information, sometimes it's information overload, and I agree with his point, but also the lack of information can really hurt you. And I know that's how the teams feel. There's a lot of guesswork this year.
For sure. Well, let's move on to the 8th pick because that's the Knicks who are on the clock, and they chose out of Dayton, Obi Toppin. I have to say, when I first started watching him, I was kind of scratching my head saying, really? And then, because I think my first note in order as I was watching these clips was like, good athlete, but he kind of plays like a power forward in the 90s. It's like Kenyon Martin, right? It kind of looks like Kenyon Martin, like movement. But then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, he can handle the ball. And I was like, wait a minute here. I think I even shared a clip of this where basically if you're going to be a first-round pick and a top 10 player when you're playing in college, you would expect to see certain plays where you just obliterate the defense. You just go, and you just dunk all over the guy. Even if you're a smaller guard, you just expect to see something like that happen. And he was the first guy out of all the lists of people I was looking at who like started to do that with some shifty left-handed dribble, like half spin move back to the baseline and then dunk on a guy. I was like, whoa. So here's a guy who, he's kind of a traditional big, but then also does have the ball handling. In fact, his post-up game, I think, is immature. I think his footwork is not nearly ready to be an efficient post player in the NBA. But you can't argue with his explosiveness and his athletic ability. It really is something to behold, and he's got that energy and that sort of that passion for the game. Anthony Edwards talks about how he might like football better. There's no question Obi Toppin is really into basketball.
Everything you said, I agree with. I mean, he is that top of the draft type player where you say this guy just jumps off the screen at you. Even if you took someone, the way that the test that you'd like to run is if you brought someone who doesn't even know the game that well and brought him to a game, they'd be able to point to Obi Toppin and say, that guy's really good. And then you go a little deeper into him and you go, wow, not only is he explosive, but he runs the floor really well, right? I know that you literally watch video of Obi Toppin and it looks like he's leaking out every play. But in actuality, what he does is he runs harder than everyone else, and he's probably the fastest guy on the floor. So he gets out, and when you talk about rim running, there's nobody even close to him in the country or in this draft who runs rim to rim better than Obi Toppin does. And because of that, he gets a lot of lobs on the break. He also immediately, if there is a defensive player down court, he immediately turns that into sealing his man, catching, turning, and getting an easy bucket. You talk about dunking on guys, but the other thing about him is he could shoot from the outside. Talking about a guy that shot nearly 40% from three this year, shot 63% from the field. When are you going to see that? A guy who's that explosive, that big, who can also step outside and shoot nearly 40% from three. That feels very NBA-ish to me. And then the other big thing about him that I think is so underrated about his game is that he's such an excellent passer. Dayton's offense, they move the ball a lot around the perimeter. So they're playing a lot of 4 out, and he was part of that. And so there's a lot of passing, moving on the perimeter for Anthony Grant's offense, and he did that. And that requires you to dribble, pass, and shoot. So he's able to do that. He finds the open man. He's a willing passer. He's somewhat of a creative passer. I love all that about him. The one knock against Obi Toppin is how much does he like to defend? And I think that that's, again, something that you can actually work on. You have his physical set, and you want to be great. I think that's where he'll show it, is if he buckles down on the defensive end. And if you wonder why he slid some when we're talking about him in these glowing terms, it comes back to that age thing again. Whereas everyone else we talk about, 19 years old, 19 years old, 19 years old is, of course, the reoccurring theme. He's 22. So when you make the comparison between him and a James Wiseman, it's not apples to apples. It's what's James Wiseman going to look like in 3 years compared to an Obi Toppin. But I absolutely love him, and I think his game is just scratching the surface. I think he is going to be a star in the NBA.
Fair enough. I agree with most of that. I just think that his shooting, his rhythm is way off. He shoots a 2-motion shot, and he does one thing I don't like. He claps for the ball. And it's like, I remember when I would coach my guys in high school, I'm like, if a guy claps for the ball, do not pass it to him. Like, that's just, but whatever. That won't happen. That will get straightened out in the NBA right quick. Let's see. Wait, where did he go?
It's funny you say that. Isaiah Joe is a guy that you'll hear a little bit later in this draft from Arkansas.
Yeah.
It's impossible to watch an Arkansas game and not see him doing that on every possession.
Yeah.
They just run him off screens, and he's constantly just clapping for the ball. Yeah. And you don't see it very often, and when you do, it is somewhat irritating.
Right. Elfrid Payton, whoever's in the Knicks, is going to be like, no, that's not happening. But here's the thing. He did shoot 39% from three on almost, 2.5 shots, 3-point attempts a game. But the ones he makes are like wide open. He has all the time in the world. He could lick his thumb and check the wind. And that actually might happen a little bit in the NBA to begin with. But if he's going to start to make over 35, 36%, he will not have that any more time. And that's when I worry about the mechanics and how they play out. Because they don't look, the energy transfer is not smooth to me. And if you don't have a lot of time and all of a sudden external forces are coming at you like that, it throws it off like that. So I would be a little bit concerned about that. But everything else I love about him. And the high energy guy who loves to play the game, who can really, really jump and really run and also pass. There should be, some room for him, in the NBA. Now, the Knicks are an interesting choice because they have a bunch of, guys sort of at that position, if you will. So I don't know how they're going to develop that and find enough time for him to develop. So we'll see. We have a super chat. I want to make sure before we get too long into it. Dev did ask about what we think about the Cavs picking Isaac Okoro. Do you think he will fit in? So he might have missed our breakdown of when Isaac Okoro got picked in 5th. Do you want to just do a 30-second quick review for what we think?
Sure. He's the best defensive player in the draft. 6'6", 225 pounds. He's going to put on weight, extremely explosive. And so for those reasons alone, could be a difference maker culturally for the Cavs. And now you talk about they already have this young backcourt with Darius Garland and Colin Sexton. And there's been questions about the culture in Cleveland. Well, I don't think you're going to have questions when this guy's leading the defense. He could be a total difference maker. And so for that reason, yes, still needs work offensively, but defensively could be a huge difference maker for what they're doing and building in Cleveland. For sure. That makes a lot of sense to me. And again, Cleveland has all the time in the world to develop him without a lot of pressure to win. So, these guys should get plenty of time to play. Now, the question is, will the backcourt share the ball and help facilitate that? We got to find that out and how that's going to work out with the coaching staff as well. So, good question, Dev, and thank you for the super chat. That was very generous of you. Varun is back in the mix again with another super chat. Thank you so much. You're the best friend of the breakdown these days. Spurs get Devin Vassell. How are we saying his name? Vassell? Vassell. I knew that. At 11, really thought he would go top 10. Solid pick by Spurs. We're going to get there in a minute, so hang on, Varun, on that one. And the Trib 1 wants to talk about Pat Williams for a second because he thought he was a late lottery pick. If you are Levine, do you try to get out ASAP or do you go Kemba route and lose till free? Lose till free what? I guess whatever. We'll figure that out. So the Kemba route, meaning I guess he means the free agency. So what do you think about, so Zach LaVine is an interesting position in Chicago because I don't know if he's exactly in their long-term plans. But I think we kind of both said that Pat Williams won't play much anyway. That won't affect Levine's playing time or his role on the team anyway, right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about with Patrick Williams, a guy that didn't start at Florida State last year. And again, Leonard Hamilton plays a lot of players. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. He's rotating guys in and out. But the truth is, we're talking about a guy that you've said many times, at least to me, he is not ready right now. So you're talking about him as a project. You're talking about him as a kid that's a really good athlete. You hope that he can develop his shot, build his confidence back up, and then, and still just have a greater understanding of the game. And then once that happens, maybe he plays a role. But even still, I don't think Zach LaVine's in a position to be losing his spot. And you think about the core pieces on that team, LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and then go Kobe White, a guy that I absolutely love and saw him work out last spring. So I think Kobe White and Zach LaVine could be this dynamic backcourt moving forward in the future. Whether they're in the long-term plans for the Bulls organization still remains to be seen. But, I mean, I don't think Patrick Williams is the reason that Zach LaVine's going to want to stay or leave. I think that won't have any impact at all. For sure. Well, let's move on to the Washington Wizards, the 9th pick.
And Denny Abdia gets picked, which was a little surprising to I think a lot of people who thought he'd go a lot earlier. I did do a video on him. I'm kind of curious of what your take is before I reveal what everyone knows mine who's here, I imagine. What is your take on Denny? Do you think he got picked at the right spot?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit worried about his shot, but I think there's some development there. He's a kid that I think likes to work. I will say that. It seems like he really enjoys the game. What I saw from him and his tape is that he's multidimensional. I found him to be a really creative passer. I like that. You talk about having that vision and also thinking, oh, I'm going to thread the needle here. It's a different mindset than a lot of players have. 6'9", but he's not got the crazy length that you normally think about as a guy at that size. Again, you're talking about a 19-year-old who's improving. And I think the question is, what is he at the next level? Some people believe that he could be a guy that could help you bring the ball up the floor. He's going to rebound, take it himself. But really, to me, his shot has to improve. And I know it did somewhat. I'm curious about your breakdown with his shot, but I really got to say that if his shot doesn't improve, then I'm curious about what his role ultimately becomes at the next level.
Yeah. Now, his father was a pro. He's been playing amongst pros as a young kid on the national team. And so he's kind of that same kind of LaMelo Ball role where he's been playing up at an early age. But the shooting, the thing that made me most depressed about watching him is that he clearly was taught not to dip on his shot, as if that was some special thing that you need to do in order to get your shot off. And in fact, it's the opposite. Duncan Robinson, they had a couple of his shots where he didn't dip at all in the finals, but he dips on every single other shot, and it's vital. And until you're at the very top of the mountain of shooting, do you ever work on that kind of thing? Yet we still have guys, and I'm sure his father was like, I'm sure that's what he learned. And I bet you if you watched his father shoot, he probably dipped and didn't know it, but he was taught not to and thought that's what he didn't do. So his rhythm is really, really bad, and you can see it in the shooting. I think actually his free throw shooting is really bad too. He shot under 60% from the free throw line. So I'm really concerned because you know what? The release looks pretty good. Everything out of his hand is there. So he's been working on it. We saw some workout footage where maybe he had tried to speed up the shot. And as a result, there is a little bit of a dip kind of going in there still. But I'm just worried because there's very specific rhythm issues or things that I look for good shooters, and he doesn't display that. Now, there's some dribbling and ball handling stuff too that I didn't like, as far as how good the handle really is. I don't think he's a lead guard. Everyone sort of was touting him as a lead guard, a big lead guard like in the Penny Hardaway mold or whatever, maybe even, not to compare just white Euro guys, but, Luka Doncic, but he's not there. He's not that level at all. But we'll see. The saving grace, I think, for him is that he is 6'9". And that will give him an opportunity to see over defenses a little bit better. But we'll see. I don't know. I don't think he's going to turn the NBA, turn him on fire with his play in his first year.
Yeah. I think everything that you said is fair. I think the other thing I would add is he's a pretty good finisher around the rim. But again, it's a different game when you're talking about going up against more athletic, the NBA bigs. So I like where his mind's at, though. And listening to him during interviews and all, his willingness and want to get better, I think is a critical point. But if you're expecting that you're getting Luka Doncic, that's not it. I think you think about him as more of a guy who imagines sort of the body about a little bit shorter, like Danilo Gallinari. Almost has, I think that's what his body will sort of become, and that's sort of what he looks like if he's a little bit stronger. But at the same time, he's a guy that's got a little bit of ball handling. There are some issues when he's trying to bring it up against a quick guard.
Yeah.
But he does have some passing ability. But again, if he's not going to shoot it well, and to your point about breaking it down, his shot, if he doesn't shoot it well, then it's going to be a lost cause, and he's going to have a tough time getting on the floor regularly.
Yeah, but he does have some bounce. I will give him that. Much bouncier than Gallinari ever was. So there is that, which goes to that finishing ability you're talking about. He can get up and do some things, but again, it's not the smoothest athlete I've seen doing it. And again, you can train that to get better. So I would imagine if he gets some NBA trainers and some really good strength and conditioning coaches who understand, the proper load and the proper spinal stacking and all those things to jump, he'd improve that and smooth that out. But again, it's a year, 2 years away from having an impact like that we would, you saw him do in Maccabi. So interesting stuff. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we have another pick here. Number 10, Phoenix, who also made a big splash with the trade to get CP3, which is a little interesting. Ultra young, talented team. They trade Ricky Rubio and get CP3, so now they're kind of in a win now mode, I suppose. But what do you think about Jalen Smith?
Well, he's taken awfully high, so it was a surprise here that Sticks Smith, as they call him, he's if you see him, I mean, his freshman year came in, it looked like he was a bit awkward almost in terms of his length. Could feel like he was a bit gangly. He's got the goggles, and you see Sticks Smith and think, oh, he's tall, he's raw, has some ability. He's going to block shots. I mean, just one of these guys that's crazy long, 6'10", average over 15 points and 10 boards a game this year. Also blocked nearly 2.5 shots a game. He's always going to be an effective shot blocker day one in the league. We know that. But the difference in his development while he's been at Maryland has really been his ability to step outside and shoot it. And he actually averaged over 1 3-pointer made a game this year. And that's a critical part of his game. And so I heard one NBA team said he could be a poor man's Kristaps because of his ability to step outside and shoot it. I don't see that even as a poor man's version of that, but he is a unique player in that you're going to get a guy that you can play at the 5 who blocks shots, but also could be another guy that you can put outside and stretches the floor some and can shoot it. And he's not going to have a problem getting that shot off in the league. So I just think it's an interesting prospect. Kind of risky, especially with the 10th pick, but I think that's the kind of draft that this is. When you don't have that information, you really like a kid, think he can help you now, especially if you just traded for Chris Paul. He's the kind of guy you say, all right, let's throw him on the roster and let's see what we can be.
Absolutely. I mean, again, Phoenix is in a position where I can't quite figure out what they want to do here. Obviously, Devin Booker's the clock is ticking for him. They want to be able to get enough talent around him to produce a winning team. And DeAndre Ayton again is also a guy who doesn't stretch the floor much and is firmly ensconced at a position that he would probably end up playing. So I don't know. Do you think that he's going to get a lot of playing time his first year?
I mean, that's the question. I think you'd have to think that they would, because they just took their 10th overall pick after trading for Chris Paul on him. So for that reason alone, I would think so, because they believe they could plug and play him. But to your point, I mean, DeAndre Ayton, we're talking about a guy who's averaging like 16 and 10 as a rookie. And then, of course, the disaster that was last season with the suspension and all. And remember, too, Phoenix feels like they're awfully close. They went 8-0 in the bubble,
right,
and then just barely missed out on getting into the playoffs. We would be thinking about this team entirely different. Then they go win now mode. Devin Booker's a superstar. DeAndre Ayton has just immense talent, even though his game may not be perfect for today's NBA. He's improving his outside shot. So I think they're looking at it like, wow, if we can get another guy who can come in, block shots, and also hit from behind the arc, he could be a piece that's valuable to us as we start to build. But how long can you rely on Chris Paul in that backcourt? That's going to be the real question for the Suns moving forward.
Right. They'll have to do a good job of load management if they want to actually make it to the playoffs and have him be ready and fresh enough to play. But, yeah, I can see that. We'll have to see. But I feel like he certainly has the tools to play in the NBA and have an impact as that energetic rim runner. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But should we go on? Oh, we have some more. Let's see, a couple more super chats here from the Trib One.
Sure.
Let's see. Well, we talked about Maroon Rispa. We haven't gotten to Devin Vassell yet, but we'll get there in a minute, so stay tuned. All right, we talked about, okay, so the Trib One wanted to, I guess, refine. Them picking Pat Williams shows that they're not trying to win now, the Bulls. Trade the pick or get a more ready player. I think Zach wants to win, not about playing time. So would Zach try and force his way out if he realizes this is a rebuild? That's certainly possible, right? He's not going to want to hang around, I don't think, while they're doing that. I'm not sure. It's hard to get into the mind of Zach LaVine and see really what his goals are. And then Trib One has another one. Thank you, my goodness. Thank you so much. Stick Smith. Smith was a decent pick to me. Thought they'd go point guard, but maybe there's some vet out there they can grab for backup point guard. All right. Oh, Stick Smith. We just talked about him. Okay. Yes. So great comment on there because I think he agrees with what we were saying. All right, but let's get back to LaVine and the Bulls. Yeah. Do you feel like they're in win now mode?
No. Where I feel like they're about 2 years away. Is where I feel, but keep in mind they just changed their front office.
Yeah, and their
now
coach.
They got a whole new front office. They have a new head coach. So now you're already, just for that reason alone, no team feels like they're a contender right now, win now, that's changing their front office and their head coach. I mean, that's a given. So we already know that they're 2-3 years away at least to being a competitive team. But like I said, Lauri Markkanen, there's a lot to love about him and his future. Kobe White, I'm a huge fan of. And then, again, you talk about Zach LaVine and is a borderline all-star and could have been an all-star this past season and could be an all-star this year. If you're talking about, and it brings up a good question that he presents there, if you're talking about, is Zach LaVine going to want out because he feels like if he's on a losing team again, he's not going to be getting all-star recognition or just recognition around the league? Well, that's true. LaVine could also be a leader for this young core, and just think about the potential with naming those guys they could have over the next few years. Wendell Carter, who's been talked about in trade rumors. I mean, there's some pieces here. There's some athletic ability. There's guys who can score. There's a lot to like about what the future of the Bulls could be. This isn't a team that has been lousy, but has no young, talented players. I'd much rather be in their position than to be some middling team that doesn't really have, great, better than like the Charlotte Hornets, for instance, and their current situation.
Well, shots fired. Okay. Let's move on to the next pick here, because it is Devin Vassell from the Spurs, picked him at number 11. The biggest thing that jumped out about him to me is, here's the thing. He shot 41.5% from three on 3.5 attempts per game in under 30 minutes. So a little bit lower in terms of playing time. Florida State, they had a lot of guys playing. He shoots over the head. His release is over the head, two motion. And I would just be willing to say that I don't think you're going to be able to get back to the 24-9 in the NBA and shoot that way consistently. I just don't think the energy transfer is there. You're going to need too much arm. And when you got guys running at you who know you're a shooter, I think it's going to be a real problem. So that's my one take on the top of the top line note I have on him is that, when you're going to shoot the ball over your head like this and then release it, I don't think you're going to be so consistent. But what do you want to argue with me on that one?
No, I trust you when it comes down to breaking down the mechanics of a shot. I will say that teams are looking at Devin Vassell as a guy who could be a 3-and-D guy for him, because not only can he shoot the ball, obviously did it at a high clip at Florida State. Like you said, somewhat limited minutes. He did start all 30 games for this team. We talk about the comparison with Patrick Williams. They play a bunch of guys. That's Leonard Hamilton's style. He gets after it. That all these guys play with a great intensity. And they have a defensive pride about them. And so that's going to carry to the league for sure. He also has a long wingspan. We're talking about a guy with 6'10" wingspan. He's average just under 13 points a game, but he's tough. He gets after it. And so if the shot can be consistent, and that's what I leave up to you, and I understand how there can be questions there. If the shot can be consistent, this is one of those 6'6", 6'7" guys that we talked about that are in this draft that, there's a handful of them that could be difference makers on the defensive side of the basketball. And I know there are some NBA teams that absolutely love this kid, that you say, hey, if we're going outside the top three, Devin Vassell would be the guy that I'm targeting, because he's a guy that I know I can play in today's NBA. He's going to hit shots from the outside. He's going to be productive, and he's going to defend his tail off. And if you have all those three things, obviously you're going to be effective in the league right now.
And by the way, I really like his finishing, and I like his pull-up game. So that's already a step ahead, in that sort of Bradley Beal mold that reminds me of a little bit, where he can pull up and hit that 15, 18-footer off the dribble. And if he can continue to refine that. And you're right, the guys that are long who are 6'7", but a 6'10" wingspan, that's huge. That's hard to find a lot of the time. And a guy who's a good athlete who is intense like that would be great defensively in the NBA. Switching, if he had to go down and maybe pick up a 6'10" dude, he could probably handle that a little bit, and he'll continue to get stronger, I'd imagine. Is Vassell 19? How old is he?
Vassell is 20 years old.
He's 20. Okay.
He turned 20 in August, so he just turned 20.
Just turned 20. So yeah,
because if this draft is in June, he's in that group
right.
of 19-year-olds, but because the draft is now, he's 20 years old.
Absolutely. So, but another guy who, will develop in, again, 3-4 years from now, the 6'7" guy who's got, doesn't have to be huge and bulked up, but has got enough of a frame, he could play small, like the power forward, small ball 4, and then who knows, 12 years from now, maybe he's a center. I'm telling you, the league is going to get smaller and smaller, and they're going to find guys who can just, handle enough of the bigger guys who aren't going to post up anymore, right? We're not really going to see that too much going forward. I mean, not enough to really kill you. But when you can get back on the other end and then destroy them because they're not matched up properly, it'll be worth it to do that. So, anyhow, I like Devin Vassell for sure, and I think he could have a good impact depending on what the Spurs are going to do. They have some decisions to make as well, but I think they're kind of also locked into, like you described. You don't want to be that team sort of middling and stuck in purgatory, sort of not tanking but not going to be in the top 5 of the conference. That's probably where they are, and it's hard to get out of that situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I will also say, I mean, the backcourt's interesting now. I mean, you're talking DeJounte Murray, who they really like. They took as a late first rounder a few years ago. They've been obviously pleasantly surprised with him. Derek White's been one of the surprises in the NBA, so he's now turning into a star, which is hard to believe after his college career. Didn't look like he'd be that guy. And then Lonnie Walker is a guy that they recently took in the draft, who obviously really good athlete. So you're talking about guys who have some size, certainly athletic in the backcourt. And now you throw in a Devin Vassell. I'm curious what position ultimately that he does play. I don't know how much time he's going to get, but you got to figure Popovich is going to love a guy that can immediately come in, play defense, add some shooting. It's funny how they always think about what's going to make their team best, even though it might not be the flashiest pick. But Devin Vassell, again, it could be. I bet there are a lot of GMs out there saying, I can't believe the Spurs got Vassell.
For sure. And, Derek White's on my favorite players list. So, and I'm not even sure I'm ecstatic with the way they've been developing him and playing him or not playing him at times, and all the young guys. You kind of have to wonder. I mean, Pop has this, this long game in his head of how he wants the people to develop and hold them accountable. But sometimes it's like it's detrimental when you don't give them enough consistent playing time. So, and it kind of, there's a little bit of a rain cloud hanging over some of the guys when they don't feel like they're getting enough of a shot. So we'll have to see. The Spurs are certainly at a crossroads, because again, Popovich is not getting any younger either. So he's on his last couple of years probably before he's done. So it'll be interesting to see how they want to finish that era off with him, and whether they're going to end up being sort of a tear it down and rebuild, and then which means giving a guy like Vassell some more time than they would have to develop. So we'll see. Well, what do you say here? We're on an hour 15. I guess let's break down a few more while we're here, because I certainly know a few of these players, and then we'll see where we're at. What do you say, Adam?
I love it. Let's go.
All right, so we got number 12, the Sacramento Kings. Oh, which, by the way, an interesting development here, where they were going to send Bogdanovich to Milwaukee, and he decided not to be part of the sign and trade to do that, which is fascinating to me, because he instantly go to a winner, playing alongside a guy that's going to generate a lot of open shots for him. Very head-scratching, to say the least. I guess the numbers weren't right for him, but man, what do you make of that?
It's really surprising to me, and especially because you think about what their starting 5 was potentially going to be now, with Jrue Holiday there in Milwaukee and Giannis, and you think about already what they were doing in terms of their scoring and then defensive rating and all. I mean, you're talking about a team that you could argue is the best offense and defense in the league last year. And obviously it didn't pan out that way in the playoffs, but it was a bubble playoffs too. So there's reason for optimism moving forward. And you have Giannis. Who doesn't want to play with that guy right now? It's kind of stunning to me with how much Jrue Holiday is beloved around, players in the NBA. It's stunning to me that you wouldn't want to join forces with those two. But and then you figure the other key pieces that they had in place. The other thing, though, that's interesting is the Kings then come out and pick Tyrese Haliburton out of Iowa State, who's one of my favorite players in this draft. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on Haliburton. But why that's interesting to me is because now you're talking about a guy who I don't think he's a 2. I know that people will call him a combo and that he plays off the ball and on the ball. I don't like his shot at all. And I know as a mechanics guy, you could probably speak to it better. But the thing about Haliburton is I think he's got the greatest feel of anyone in this draft. He's kind of herky-jerky. There's just sort of a different style of play that he has, but his vision is terrific, and I really love just how he plays at his own pace and has a great feel for the game, just a true understanding. But here's the thing. You've got De'Aaron Fox as your point guard star of the future, and I don't think the two of them really mesh well together. I think De'Aaron Fox is going to be your ball-dominant guard, And so even though I know a lot of people will say, well, you don't have a true point guard in some teams and both guys handle it, I don't know. In this case, I think it's sort of different. I like Haliburton as a guy I'd want to give the ball to on day one and say, hey, you run my team. I don't like him playing off the ball as much, but he can do it. And you look at his shooting numbers, he was effective at Iowa State. But I was kind of stunned by this move. And here's the other thing about Tyrese Haliburton was that even though he shot over 3 both seasons this year, and he's got a 7-foot wingspan, also another reason to love him. The other big thing I would say about him, though, is he suffered an injury. So he's another guy that you're going to be talking about that will have gone basically a year without playing basketball. And that's going to be difficult, too, to see him bounce back from that. But I'm curious about what you think of Haliburton.
Oh, I mean, the vision and the audacity of the passes he makes, it reminds me of Trae Young. Like, it's a longer, taller Trae Young, seriously. And no conscience as a shooter. Like, just he will shoot it. Now, the shot is really funky. Low set point. Yes. I don't know if I even like his rhythm, but he does get it off on the way up. So there was something there that was like, okay. But I was wondering if he's in the same kind of boat where he's like, yeah, the ones he makes are the ones that are wide open when he has all the time in the world to kind of set up. But I'm reserving judgment on that funkiness just yet. I kind of want to see it in the NBA and see if maybe he can work that out. But again, I love the guys that live to pass and are always looking to make those plays. So I feel like he's just the kind of guy, gets with a good pro trainer, works on his finishing moves, just cleans up a lot of stuff that he has, and just keeps getting better on that end. And he can be a really good player. I'm talking about one of those guys that, how did he fall, this far? Now, I don't know if that culture that we have over in Sacramento is conducive to that kind of development. It really doesn't seem like it's been that way, although, Luke Walton is there, and you'd think that there's something there to be had. So it could go either way with him, but there's definitely a huge upside without question.
Yeah, and I do have to wonder. I mean, you already know now that with the Bogdanovich move that this is a team that could be making moves. Maybe by the end of the night, maybe, over the next few days, maybe we don't see him on the roster for much longer. And that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Just because of who's there, just because they're already looking to make trades, I think it could be interesting that he's a guy again. And I don't know, you look at Buddy Hield too. Like I'm just, the whole thing is kind of curious to me. It's now look, if it's me and it's best available player, then Tyrese Haliburton actually might be that guy. And you make the pick and then you figure it out later. And I think he does have that kind of talent that you say, let's bring him onto this roster and figure it out after the draft.
I agree. So we'll keep your eye on him. Don't forget about that because I think Tyrese Haliburton could be that guy. Number 13 out of Alabama, Kyra Lewis was picked by the New Orleans Pelicans. Another team that's sort of I can't quite figure out what they're trying to do because they got rid of Drew Holiday. Even though you think that they're in win now mode, but they get rid of him and they bring in Eric Bledsoe, the guy who I thought was holding back the Bucks to no end, and George Hill. It's probable that maybe none of those guys are still on the team as we get closer to the season. They might get rid of them and do something else with them. I don't know. But either way, Kyra Lewis is now on the team. And what are your thoughts?
Well, Kyra Lewis is the quickest, fastest player in this draft. On the perimeter, he's one of these guys that's a one dribble move, and he is by you. His first step is explosive. So he is getting by you. And then the interesting thing, and the thing that I really like looking at Kyra Lewis tape as I dove deep into it, is his ability to finish. He's one of these guys who finishes with both hands, uses the rim really well so that, bigs have a tough time blocking his shot. And he's also one of these guys who, at the moment that you start to hesitate or even try to take a charge, he's really good at sliding around you and sidestepping you some in the paint, which you don't see a lot. But the guys who do it well, it's almost the old Tony Parker moves. When guys who do it well, all of a sudden you see these guards who finish and you're like, wow, I can't believe that they make it look so easy in the paint. He sort of has that feel to his game. So for those reasons, I really like Kyra Lewis. He also reclassified. So he just turned 19 years old in April. A young kid, but actually could even be younger. I mean, he's a top 50 recruit in high school, but he reclassified, skipped a year, played 2 seasons at Alabama, started every single game there. And when you look, I mean, yes, his scoring numbers over 18 a game. He averaged over 5 assists, and he only shot 36.6% from 3. But one thing that's interesting, his last 16 games of last season, over 20 points a game, nearly 6 assists, and shot over 40% from three. And sometimes you need to look at just a different set of numbers, not just what he did on the season. Sometimes guys go through cold stretches for whatever reason. Their confidence is down. They might be battling an injury that you don't know about. But when a guy can shoot over 40% from three for an extended stretch, we know he can make shots from the outside. And I think his shot looks okay. So Kyra Lewis is a guy that I think actually could be one of the steals of this draft.
I agree. I love his finishing, especially the left hand. He really uses his left hand well and the rim to protect the ball, which is rare to see. Now you're saying he's 19 now after reclassifying, but he's a 19-year-old that's played 2 full college seasons. That's another thing to be impressed with, because I think most 19-year-olds coming in the draft only have 1 season under their belt. He hops a little bit on his jump shot, which I love to see, and so I would not be surprised to see him continue to shoot that well. How tall is he?
He's 6'3".
Okay, so he's got a very traditional point guard size. In that, I mean, not to say he reminds me of Kyrie, but he's got a little bit of that creative finishing around the rim stuff that you see Kyrie do, and a similar body and a similar explosiveness. So, what do you think about his handles? Does he have handles like that?
Yeah, not to the level that Kyrie does, but he's quicker. He's one of those guys that when he decides to go, he's going to get by you. And so what's really interesting, you think about the athleticism now that's going on. I mean, teaming him up, you already have Zion there. And it's interesting. Now anyone you add, you just think about like the athletic ability. And he's not one of those guys that's athletic in the sense that he's dunking over people left and right. It's more about his ability to get by you and his quickness. And so it's almost like he doesn't need a crazy set of complex dribble moves. Now, that quickness is going to be nullified some when he gets against NBA athletes and guys who are just as quick as he is. But he's one of those guys that you'll see right away. When he wants to get to the rim, he can, and that's extremely helpful for him. And it's rare to find guards who finish well. Tony Parker, Kyrie Irving, Rod Strickland, and he's sort of in that mold as a guy that really finishes well with both hands, and that makes it awfully tough when he gets in the paint. I think the next step for his development will be, can he get in the lane and then find people? And obviously his assist numbers are pretty good, but they need to be excellent. Is a guy with great vision, and that's what I'd really like to see as the next iteration of his game.
Love it. Well, let's get let's get a few more picks. We'll see how we do. At number 14, Aaron Nesmith out of Vanderbilt went to the Celtics. I like this pick. I had looked at a little bit of film. A buddy of mine told me you got to check out Aaron Nesmith, and he's a shooter. He can shoot.
Yes.
And he's not really ready to do much else, and he's not like hyper quick and the great athlete or anything like that, but he can shoot the rock. And so all of a sudden I'm picturing, and let me see here. How many years did he play in college? 4?
No.
1. 2.
He played 2 seasons.
Sorry, he played 2 seasons, and he shot 52% from 3 on 8 attempts per game. I mean, the guy's a shooter. The shot looks great. So you can picture him in the Celtics offense, and they teach him exactly where to be and what shots he's going to get from behind the line. And he could, play his 15, 18 minutes a game, even, coming in now, and actually have a good effect in the game. Certainly the Celtics could use more shooting. Everybody could. I'm just kind of curious where the Celtics rank on the – I'll tell you right now. Yeah, they were 13th. So they were, around average in three-point percentage overall in the league. So this guy could really help them on that end and give them some quality minutes.
Yeah, he's the best shooter in the draft. And so I think you start there and you say, all right, if you're looking for shooting, and it's weird, his name's actually pronounced Aaron Nesmith.
Oh, Nesmith, excuse me.
Because, you would think it. I need to take that in as a guy whose Nesmith lives as my handle.
Yep.
It's awfully close. I pay attention. But it's interesting, Nick. I've thought about this a lot and was actually just having a discussion with Matt Muehlbach, the former Arizona star, earlier today. We were discussing this idea that in today's NBA, it's so much about having as many shooters on the floor at one time as you can have and spacing and all that. And yet it's sort of counter to the kids that are coming up through the AAU system that are playing so many games over their summers, and they're working with trainers, and their ball handling's great. They're athletic, and their feel for the game is pretty good, but you're not seeing as many shooters enter the league. And so all of a sudden one comes out and you're like, oh, it's a gem that these guys, you got great athletes and you guys have a versatile skill set, but where are the shooters? And he's the first one that you point to that you go, he can really shoot the ball, like you said. So 6'6", average 23 points a game. Shooting numbers, obviously insane, 52% from 3, as you said. quick release, so you love that. He did get injured this year, so it's a smaller sample size when you talk about his shooting. He only played 14 games before being injured, but he's a guy that instantly can come in and add shooting to your team, and he can also defend some. And again, not the greatest athlete. He's not the quickest guy out there, and he's not going to find other ways to score. But when you're looking at a guy who could potentially impact your team from a shooting perspective, and really there aren't that many guys in the league that are just strictly every time automatic shooters, but he's one of them. I was blown away with his stroke, but the rest of his game is meh. But you got to love the fact that he can really pull the trigger.
Absolutely. So I'm anxious to see if he gets time and he can contribute because, the reason why in AAU you don't see guys who just like kind of catch and shoot like that is because they'll never get the ball. You almost never have an offense now in those games where you can just come off of screens and then shoot like you'd see Rip Hamilton used to do. So it would be really frustrating if you were a shooter. You never get those shots. You'd have to do it off the dribble, which is what we'll probably end up seeing, I think, as we move forward. I would hope that, even a guy like Duncan Robinson, right? He has to put the ball on the ground to get some space and then shoot it. And then in the past, it would have been Kyle Korver, who never shoots the ball. He never dribbles the ball. He just shoots it when they got on the catch. So the guys like that in the college also get keyed on. So all of a sudden they know he's the shooter. They're not going to let him catch the ball, and so he'll never get the shot off unless he can develop a shooting off the dribble. So either way, it's a refresher to see that happen. And I do believe that Nesmith can shoot off the dribble as well. We'll have to see if he can start to translate that a little bit in the NBA, because certainly you're going to need that on any kind of shot fake, side dribbles, or they might get a pick and roll for him every once in a while, or come off of handoffs. There's going to need to be a dribble or two before he shoots it. So we'll see, but. Let's see if we can clean up the last couple picks here before we get too long in the tooth here. We got Cole Anthony going to Orlando. What do you think? His stats are pretty good at Carolina, but he's certainly been hyped for a long time, considering who his dad is.
Yeah, no question. Greg Anthony's son. It was weird because he was one of those guys that was all everything coming into college, and then goes out in his first game and explodes over 30 points in his debut, and people were just like, "Oh, I'm all about Cole Anthony right now," and incredibly explosive as an athlete. He can shoot it, but did struggle shooting the ball, did struggle with turnovers. I think he was trying to do too much, to be honest with you. There were just issues with inconsistency all season long. After a really good start very early on, it felt like too much was on his shoulders. But I'll tell you something. He played it at Oak Hill Academy, the storied program, Oak Hill. You can list all the greats that have come out of there. And the one thing that, whether it's Carmelo Anthony, Brandon Jennings, the list, it just goes on and on and on. But Steve Smith, the legendary coach that has built that program at Mouth of Wilson, Virginia, he talked about Cole Anthony like this kid is just special. And he even told my podcast co-host on Rejecting the Screen, Noah Kozlov, and I, about basically that another kid essentially quit, that he was getting embarrassed by Cole Anthony. And this was another, you don't play at Oak Hill at all if you can't play. And this kid was like embarrassed because of how good Cole Anthony was. And the kid realized that he wasn't going to play.
Yeah.
And so I just think the talent level is so high. The work ethic is nuts. This kid gets after it. He's a gym rat. So he's one of those that I thought was going to be taken way too low and was going to be the most undervalued player in this draft and could have superstar potential, should have star potential. And yet instead what we see is he gets taken, I think, at a good spot, but I still think it's great value, and I really like Cole Anthony.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. The hype was so, the pressure was so great on him that I wouldn't blame anybody for struggling at all with that, and certainly inconsistently. But as far as the highlights go, and when you look at the ability that he does have, he's got a serious handle. He can make people look silly off of that. He can shoot it. I like his form. He's got a nice rhythm. He has a good turn. So I think, and he's also, he's 19, right?
No, actually, Cole Anthony is 20 years old, even though he only played one season at North Carolina. He turned 20 in May.
Okay. So, I was hoping, 19 is a little bit better than 20 for what he's doing, but still, I'm curious to see now in Orlando, again, another one of those teams that's sort of stuck in purgatory at the moment. Like, what do they want to do and how they want to develop that? And so, we'll see how he will handle that because, it could be, it could go either way for him. But I do feel like he's got ability, and it depends. So much of this is like, your mental state and how confident you are, and whether that gets wrecked or not. So we'll have to keep our eye out on that, how that fits. But I think a good value at 15. I think that was good. I think it would have been an overvalue if he got picked in the top 7. That probably wouldn't have been, I don't know why I have the name Austin Rivers in my head, because he got picked. I could probably because father played in the NBA, same idea. But that kind of pressure weighed on him as well, and I don't think it helped him at being a top, because Austin Rivers was the top 10 pick, right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was within the top 10.
Yeah, and so this might be a better situation for him where he's 15th and he doesn't have as much pressure on him. So let's move on to the next pick, number 16 by the Blazers, Isaiah Stewart. What's your take on him out of Washington?
So Isaiah Stewart is one of those guys that has a body that you can't teach, and he's got a motor that you can't teach. He plays hard, and there's a lot to love about Isaiah Stewart. Again, another 19-year-old. The question sort of is, he's 6'9", and he is rugged. He is incredibly strong, and it's really about, could he be a 5-man in today's NBA? And that's really what you want to go on. Because offensively, he's going to get after it. He's going to overpower you. He's going to run the floor. But it's really his +1 skill is his motor. And, you look at the guys that I would say, the comparisons to, and obviously Montrezl Harrell comes to mind. And you start to think about guys that just are relentless and get after it. Kenneth Faried type. He fits in that mold where his body is something to behold, but in addition to that, he is never going to stop working. And he had a ton of hype coming in, and every night he got after it, and he was extremely productive at Washington. So, look, if he's a couple inches taller, and this is a decade ago, then we're talking about a top 5 pick. But you're talking about lose a couple inches, 6'9". It actually might work in today's NBA with that body, his ability to rebound. And again, you're not looking at a guy that's going to be a consistent 3-point shooter, but he is somebody that could make an impact if he can play the 5 at the next level.
Sure, I love the Montrezl Harrell comp. However, you're never going to see Trez, face up and shoot a 15-footer out of the post. This guy can do that. And that's impressive to me. That he's got enough of a stroke to do that. And then, by the way, once you get to like 15, 16, it's not a stretch to think, okay, let's get you back to 20, and then eventually maybe even farther. So that is one thing that he does that I think that Trez does not do, which is encouraging, because again, he has all that he's got that meanness to him in the post, right? He wants to dominate you down there, and he's going to use his shoulders and use his strength. So that's exactly what you see with Montrezl Harrell. So I like that a lot. I just feel like he does have a little extra dimension to his offensive game. And then the question is defensively, can he compete? Can he make plays on that end? Because that role for him, I suspect will have to be that energy guy that's going to come in there, be rugged, and protect the rim a little bit. I'm sorry, can he protect the rim? Do we think he's going to be able to do that in the NBA level?
Yeah, I think he can. He's not your classic guy that's going to shut down anyone. He's not going to be an intimidating presence in terms of, like a Stick Smith is going to be and block shots in that way. He's going to block some shots, but and he will be somewhat of a rim protector, but it's not in the classic sense that you're hoping an Okongwu becomes or a Stick Smith. I think this was more of he can play your 5, he can defend, he can battle a joker in the post, but at the same time, I don't think you're asking him to be a guy that's completely blocking 3 shots a game.
Great points. Now, let's wrap this up. Listen, this is amazing. We've done this for 90 minutes plus. Everyone is still here in the chat. It's amazing. And Varun Rispud has yet another super chat. Thank you so much. And he's going to bring us to our last discussion, because I want to skip over a couple of things to my favorite player in the draft. He references that Nets get Saddiq Bey at 19. Will he be part of the Harden trade? What do you think about Tyrese Maxey? I think he's slipping in the draft. Well, let's ignore the Tyrese Maxey thing for a second, because I'll let you maybe weigh in for a minute on that one. But Saddiq Bey, I'm looking through, and it's funny because I was talking to a guy in the NBA and basically had challenged me to see if I could figure out who his favorite player was in this draft. So I'm like, who can it be? And this guy, shooting is a big thing for him. And as soon as I'm kind of randomly picking the names, trying to figure it out. As soon as I queued up some Saddiq Bey footage, I was like, that's the guy. And I ended up being right. This is him. This is a steal because we might talk about Vassell being, no, I'm sorry. Gosh, who's the best shooter we just talked about?
Aaron Nesmith.
This guy, though, is up there with his three-point shooting. Plus, if he really is 6'8", legitimately 6'8", he plays like a guard, and this is the guy who I've been thinking about, like, where are these guys who are the 6'8", 6'9", who can really shoot, could probably play some defense? Those are the guys who should be number one, number two, and yet here he is falling all the way down toward the end of the first round. So what do you think about him?
Listen, the one part of your story about your NBA guy that you're forgetting is you and I were texting, and as you were telling me this, I was telling you Saddiq Bey, before you even said that, is my favorite player in this draft. and then you were basically backing it up, and I felt pretty good about who else felt the same way in the league. Saddiq Bey, to me, there's so much to love about this kid. First of all, he plays at his own pace. And that is so difficult to do. And even at the college level, it's one thing when you're playing teams that are playing fast. There's a crazy energy, crowd gets into it, all that. There are certain guys that are just poised, they're composed, and you even see it in the league. That always translate. Guys that can just play at their own pace. He has this smooth game that he plays at his own pace. I felt the same way about Jason Tatum when he was coming out, and I remember we were going back and forth about Jason Tatum during that draft back in 2017, and it was the same thing. Tatum was a guy, it doesn't matter how the rest of the team is playing or even what his productivity was, you just knew he felt confident about his game, and that usually starts because they're secure about their ability to shoot. And so Saddiq Bey can certainly shoot it. I mean, has that smooth stroke, like you mentioned, shot 45% from three. You also look at his last 17 games. He didn't score as much in the early part of the season, but as this season went through, nearly 18 points a game and shot nearly 50% from three. So you're talking about a guy that was a consistent 3-point threat, scores at all three levels, lets the game come to him. I love Saddiq Bey. Like, to me, this guy could play on an NBA roster right now. He could get in a pickup game with NBA players and look just as good as any of them. So Saddiq Bey, to me, is the ultimate steal. Again, he's 21 years old, which is probably the reason, turned 21 in April. It's probably the reason that he slid some, but to me, he's a star at 6'8". I mean, there is reason to love him. And yes, if you are trading with the Nets, and if you are the Rockets, let's say, and you want to now, he's reportedly traded to the Pistons, so that deal's already looking like it's done. So if that's the case, if he's going to the Pistons, like, you have to love what the Pistons are doing. Earlier in the draft, we saw Killian Hayes. Now we see Saddiq Bey. So the team is adding shooting. They're adding some guys that they feel can be real standouts right away. I think they're starting to build their total core for the future. I am loving it. And a friend of mine, John Phelps, is in their front office. He was the GM of the Grand Rapids, the G League team. And I know he's in their front office with Troy Weaver, and they are building some things there. I'm really impressed with what the Pistons are doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the Saddiq Bey trade in Woj's timeline. I don't see that. Although I do see that Landry Shamit's traded to the Nets for number 19 pick. So that was 20 minutes ago. But wait, I don't see, and then Rodney McGruder.
The NBA has it. He was first dealt to the Clippers.
Yeah.
And now it's being reported that he's being dealt to the Pistons.
Okay. So a great pickup for them as well. So I'm excited to see him. Here's the thing you got to remember about Villanova, guys. Jay Wright, his development program is fantastic. And so those guys all are really, really accomplished and highly skilled. So, and we'll have, like you had said, that he has all the tools. It's no question because of going through that program, he's going to have everything at his disposal. Now, his body is going to develop into LeBron, right? Like, he's going to be 6'8". He's already, got the big shoulders. He's ready to develop into that in that mode, but still can shoot. So I think he's going to end up being that guy that can be really, really good. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're in 3 years from now, 5 years from now, scratching their heads going, how the heck did he go 19th? It makes no sense to me because he's the quintessential kind of player that should go the top of the draft every single year. And, he'll get paid. He won't get paid yet because he's going to be 19th. He's whatever that rookie scale is not great, but he will get paid. I have a feeling.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Well, listen, Adam, awesome show. some of the best insights we're going to get anywhere. And I know everybody in the chat agrees. That's why we're all still here hanging out with us. So I can't thank you enough for joining me. And as always, it's always the most fun to hang out with you and talk basketball. Yeah, I really appreciate it, Coach. You've been a great friend over the years. It's always fun to do the draft when we get a chance to. And the fans are lucky to get to listen to you. And if they want to interact with me, happy to talk draft as the night goes on. And certainly in the ensuing days, I'm at Nesmith Lives on Twitter. And our podcast is Rejecting the Screen. And we do long form interviews once a week. And then Noah Kozlov and I talk a little bit of hoops, a little bit of life on our other podcast. So you can catch it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Rejecting the Screen. Follow me on Twitter at Nesmith Lives. I'm always up for a good basketball discussion. So any of these questions, and if it comes down to the mechanics of a shot, some of the fundamentals, look, I'm a shooter too, but I trust the biomechanics. I come to you, Coach. Hey. I don't think anybody knows it better than you. Send them over. Another big, huge thanks to Gigolo Puff out there for moderating the comments. You are always out there. You are my rock, and you never miss a show. Another huge shout outs to friends of the Breakdown over in the super chats. Varun, the Trim One, Dev. Varun is all over the place. He's all over. Thank you so much for all of that. It really helps. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing I'm going to be launching very soon a membership program, which will be really interesting. So I'll let you know more about that coming up. But I want to make sure you guys understand that and we get ready for it, because it will not be a lot of money. It'll be a chance to sort of, support the B-Ball Breakdown and get some extra content. So stay tuned for that. And again, thanks to everybody for being here. Thank you, Adam, for being part of the show. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Adam? I'm always in, Coach.